So, we're in an indie golden age, right? I mean, I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to come out and say it if we're all trying to be coy about it and hiding it for some reason. If we think that saying it out loud is somehow going to cancel it out. But, um, yeah, it seems to be the case, and I don't really see anyone else saying that right now seems to be the indie game golden age. Not even indie games. I mean, just indie stuff in general. Like the Iron Lung movie, which admittedly is based on an indie game, completely outperformed expectations. Independent media, podcasts and the like, seem to be absolutely mogging traditional media. I really think we're in the indie golden age right now. Ultimately, this is kind of the perfect storm of two things happening at the same time. On one hand, we have overbloated, profit driven companies creating more expensive solutions and having anti consumer behavior just in general all across the board. And on the other side, we have an overflowing amount of talent coming from the internet in a culture that's becoming more stratified by the year. I think I want to touch on this more in another video after I've done some more research, but since this is kind of just a casual thing that I'm throwing together, I'm just going to throw this out there. But our culture has become much more stratified than it was even 30 years ago. I'll tell you what I mean by that, okay? In 1983, over 100 million people watched the finale of MASH. This is one of the most watched televised events of all time. And it wasn't even terribly uncommon for people to do this. I mean, not in these numbers, but there used to be a real strong social cohesion around TV. People would go home at the same time after working their 9 to 5, and they would watch the same TV shows because, back in the 50s and 60s, there was only a handful of channels that you even had. Obviously, MASH was a little bit later than that. But you went from the 50s and 60s having, just a few channels to hundreds of channels by the 90s to hundreds of millions of potential websites or sources of content by the late 2000s, 2010s, in that range. And now, I mean, it's even more than that. We're just going insane. But again, it's like I said, there's two things going on here. It's not just that there's a lot of indie stuff available, because I think there's always been a lot of indie stuff available, but it just kind of turns out that the way these platforms are built is sort of perfect for this revolution to be taking place right now. There used to be in media a concept of something called a gatekeeper, and to an extent, this is still a thing. Imagine like a record executive who, if a band wants to get their record signed, they have to go to her. Bet you were imagining a guy, sexist. They have to go to her in order to, get signed. So they only get their music on the radio, or they only get it printed, the CDs, vinyl, if they get this deal, which ultimately boils down to whether or not this record executive likes their music. So it's their taste defining what the culture is. And this doesn't really exist anymore, because since the early 2020s, we've sort of switched over from having human curated stuff to algorithm curated stuff. We're all very familiar with this. Tons of people that are way smarter than me have talked about it to death. But everything that you do on your phone or on your computer is monitored extremely closely, and then a computer algorithm tries to find the ideal way to keep you using that platform for as much time as possible. That's the goal of all of these algorithms. That means that it's going to serve you whatever content it thinks is going to keep you on a little bit longer. I'm not going to get into the long-term effects of that. Again, people way smarter than me have unpacked it to death, and I think everyone's pretty well aware that it's not a healthy thing overall for people. But, there's actually some upsides to that, which is that there's no more human gatekeeper, where their taste is deciding, who gets to succeed and who gets to fail. It's much more democratized now, and there are way more niches to fill. So, essentially you go from having this sort of mainstream society or culture where everyone is sort of watching the same stuff, absorbing the same media. Nowadays, everyone's media diet is completely different. Everyone's getting their news from different places. Everyone's playing different games. It's the Wild West. But, this wouldn't be happening if some of these bigger players in the internet content space weren't shitting the bed and kind of forcing people to go the indie route in a lot of these directions. People are getting tired of live service games with freemium models where they make all their money off of manipulative loot crates. That seems to be the industry standard, but HighGuard failed for that reason. It actually came out that HighGuard failed because they weren't listening to the developers at all. They were pushing a revenue model that was decided by the shareholders and board and the other, corporate interests that the HighGuard developers were beholden to. It seems that the developers actually sort of knew that it would be DOA, and this is going to continue to happen. I mean, the new Call of Duty flopped this year. Activision shit the bed on that one. Yeah, people are just getting tired of it, man. People are tired of going to the same Marvel movies over and over. All these overpriced, over budgeted, super CGI driven AI movies. It's just way too much, and they're not even making their money back. So my thought is, how sustainable could this be? Clearly not very. This is coming on the heels of a bunch of Battlefield developers getting fired, and we all know how well that game did. So it just seems like in the corporate media space right now in general, you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because at the end of the day, these companies have to prioritize raising profit margins over literally everything else, which is why HighGuard and Call of Duty and Microsoft, not to mention Nvidia with the recent DLSS 5 announcement, they're just refusing to listen to anything the consumer says. They're sacrificing that relationship for the sake of driving the profits just a little bit further. But it's incredibly short-sighted. This would work out for them if they were monopolies, if there were no alternatives. But as I said before, the internet is much more democratized now, and people can choose where they get their content from. They killed HighGuard. They killed Call of Duty. They're going to kill whatever soulless trash you put in front of them next. And it's just going to keep happening, and you're going to keep shutting down more studios and laying off more developers until you're kind of just like a skeleton crew and you're not doing anything. It's crazy to me that there used to only be a year or two between game sequels, like Assassin's Creed Black Flag to Assassin's Creed Unity. I think that was like 1 year. And now we're looking at, who knows when GTA 6 is actually going to come out. These companies are just spending way too much money and getting way too little return. It doesn't make sense from a dollars and cents standpoint. They're not even making consumers happy. So who are they doing this for exactly? Like, what is this in service of? The answer is that it doesn't matter, and that they're going to keep firing people to drive down costs and taking the most predatory revenue models that they possibly can, because they literally can't see the end of the runway here like the rest of us can. Yeah, so you've got this culture that's becoming more stratified. People are losing faith in the mainstream institutions that have held the internet together since really the 2000s, when all these players were first coming into the market, And yeah, I really just think we're in an indie golden age right now. Look at the top 10 games on Steam from 2025. Look at Expedition 33 becoming the game of the year. Look at Iron Lung, the movie, completely outperforming expectations. I just think that now is a really bad time to be a publicly traded media company, because everyone hates you and they're all losing faith in your ability to deliver quality content, and they know that they can get it from other places. And they're going to continue to do that and support independent artists because there are no more mainstream monopolies that can exist on the internet. So I think I'm going to leave it there. This is the indie golden age. I hope you guys are excited as I am. Yeah, let's just all take like all of Microsoft's money.